Nakisha and here to moderate our conversation with these lovely people to my left. We got a really long title for you, Solutions, Not Suspensions. This is how we close the school to prison pipeline. There's a lot of jargon in there. We're gonna kick this off by starting to just sort of flesh that out for those of you who may be new to the school discipline issue and this piece of the education reform movement. And then we're gonna get into really talking about what that is, how it's impacting our young people, how it's impacting our communities, and what we're going to do about it, what we are doing about it. These people to my left are the absolute experts in the work. They are the folks in the communities doing this, living it, breathing it. And so we're just going to let them speak truth to power, let them talk to you about what's happening, what's not happening, what we need to do, and how you can join the movement. All right, sound good?
Yeah.
All right. So again, like I said, my name is Nakisha, and I come to this work as a former program manager for the Schott Foundation for Public Education. In about 2008 or thereabouts, the Schott Foundation, along with several other philanthropic partners, sought out to launch what is now called the National Opportunity to Learn campaign. And really, the Schott Foundation, in their work for a number of years, has been supporting grassroots organizing in several cities across the country, really trying to support a broad-based movement for education reform, and felt that, we've got to be able to do more, like we're just not doing enough by ourselves. And so went out to their colleagues and said, let's join up, let's do this together, and let's look at how we can really support a broad-based movement. And that means that we've got to be in several states around the country and create some sort of an umbrella for folks to be able to connect and to build and to really move the needle on this work. And so at the time, there were about these 4 core tenets of opportunity to learn, did some research, really figure out what would it take to make sure that every child, regardless of race, regardless of gender, regardless of ethnicity, socioeconomic background, immigration status, you name it, just every child got access to a high-quality education, right? So what would that take? And so research showed us a number of different things, among them highly prepared and effective teachers, access to early child care, quality early child care, and a number of other things. And so as we started to do that work and work with advocates on the ground, they helped us to appreciate. So we did some learning, right? So, funders, we like to go in communities and tell folks what to do. It's kind of what we do, right? Throw our weight around with our money. So we set out to do this work a little bit differently, right? And to really be in community with folks and allow them to really tell us what we needed to be funding, how the work needed to be shaped, and then to be able to provide the supports in fiscal resources, but beyond that, to really elevate and create a campaign. And so in doing that work, even though we had all this really great research, we came to see that, at the core of this work that was causing disenfranchisement in education was this thing about suspensions, right? Like kids were just getting pushed out of school left and right. It was being framed as dropout, that certain kids didn't want to be in school, they didn't want to learn, right? And so we said, well, okay, we're trying to create an opportunity to learn, and you're telling us kids don't want to be in school, like, what is that? And so, some of these folks at the table with us really became the pioneers of what I really call the school discipline movement as we know it today, coining terms like school to prison pipeline, school to low wage work, and several others. And so now we've reached this moment where we've got not only Secretary of Education, Arne Duncan, but Eric Holder also talking about suspensions and how we've got to really stop it, keep kids in the classroom. And so that's the conversation we're going to have this afternoon. What is the work? How did we get here? What does this moment mean for us now? And where do we go from here, right? So again, we're going to jump into this dialogue. I'm going to briefly introduce my friends to my left, and then just let them tell you more about their work. Sound good? All right.
Yes.
All right, so immediately to my left is, pull up these bios. Great. Is Tony Raines. Tony is a rising senior at Tony, I hope I don't get your name of your school wrong, Renaissance High School here in Detroit. And one of the things I love most about her is that, like myself, she's a young, or like I was back in the day, a young community organizer, and is an organizer with the Harriet Tubman Project here in the city. So really excited to have a local voice and a youth voice with us. So this is all about the young people. We do it for them. And sitting next to Tony is Macy Chin. She's the executive director and co-founder of Cadre, parent organizing group in South LA, is it, Macy? So I can tell you a number of great things about Macy, but I'll just tell you from a point of personal privilege, as I've had the pleasure to work with Macy coast to coast for the last couple of years through our work at the Schott Foundation and several other movements. I'm just really, really excited that she's able to join us this afternoon for this conversation, because she is just one of the most brilliant minds engaged in this work. Sitting next to Macy is Harold Jordan. Harold is part of the coordinating committee and a member of the Dignity in Schools campaign. It's a national coalition of folks organized, well, it's intergenerational in nature, organizing around school discipline reform. And so we're going to hear a lot about dignity in schools, and we're one of the anchor partners in this campaign called Solutions Not Suspension. So very pleased that Harold's able to be with us this afternoon. And last, certainly not least, we've got Harry Lawson, and Harry joins us this afternoon from the National Education Association. And so we know that when we're talking about schools and we're talking about parent organizing and youth organizing, oftentimes it seems like in the media, like there's this tension between teachers and community, that labor and community can't come together, and we can't figure out how to be solution-oriented together. So we're going to talk to you about something a little bit different this afternoon, what we know is working, what has been working, and really, really pleased to have fantastic partners like the NEA engaged in this work with us and really supporting parents and communities and understanding that teachers have a voice in this work too, and that together we all can achieve more. All right, so those are my folks. I'm going to let them tell you a little bit more about themselves as they talk to you about their work, and then we're going to jump into the conversation. All right, I'm going to bring it on down so I can be in this too. So I gave you guys all a little bit of a background on the Opportunity to Learn campaign. Some of you have worked a little bit more intimately with the campaign over the course of the last several years. But beyond the work of the campaign, and I think even beyond Solutions Not Suspensions, there's really like, what is this school discipline work? And so we've been throwing out words like school to prison pipeline and all of that. But from each of your unique vantage points, if you could, in just a couple of minutes, just tell us really who you are, how you come to this work around school discipline reform, what it means to you, and what you're doing. What is your stake in the game? Tony?
Good afternoon. My name is Tony Raines, as she introduced me earlier. I'm a rising senior at Renaissance High School, and I'm also a member of Youth Voice. Youth Voice is a project of the Harriet Tubman Center downtown, and Youth Voice gives youth the power to let their voices be heard on issues that are sometimes overshadowed because we don't necessarily get the chances to talk about them. Recently, we've been doing work with the Zero Tolerance Law and with the School to Prison Pipeline. Earlier this year in March and in April, we led a march of over 450 people from down near the Fox Theater to Lansing. It lasted from Monday to Wednesday, and we marched for a policy change and policy reform. It's troubling and alarming to us that a straight-A student who may get suspended for missing the ID badge will also get the same 180-day suspension length as the child that brought a firearm to school. When you get suspended over minute issues, it discourages you from attending school, and that's where we get into the school to prison pipeline. If I get suspended for missing my ID badge or being out of uniform, then I'm late on work. I can't catch up. Then it discourages me from attending. Therefore, I don't go, and then I'm ending up in situations that I shouldn't be in.
Thank you. Thank you, Macy.
Good afternoon. All right. So thank you for that gracious introduction, Nakisha, and certainly Tony for pretty much spelling it out. Like Nakisha said, there's a whole lot of jargon, but then there isn't. So as an organizer of parents in South Central LA, I come to this issue after knocking on doors. But even prior to that, it was really just witnessing some incredibly racist treatment of students within and among, unfortunately, adults on a campus that were supposedly part of a reform effort. So the contradictions in both the spirit of reform, but also kind of like how the community was viewed, was really my lightning rod. It also happened to be a teacher of a young woman that I was shepherding through high school at that particular moment. And so the stark reality of what we were really up against really compelled me to just take the dive and start talking to parents. And we started Cadre in 1999. And we spent most of the first few years living room meetings and door knocking. And in addition to just the sheer disrespect that parents felt, that in many ways we're not even sure people really can imagine some of the things that parents feel because the narrative is so often about blaming them. But in addition to knocking on doors, it didn't matter what door, what neighborhood, every few doors, there was a story about their kid getting sent home from school with no paperwork, with no instructions on what to do next, some verbal instruction that they were supposed to show up 3 days later, back on Monday, and that the parent had to come. But that was it. No reason, no right to appeal, no due process, no homework sent home while you were gone, etc. And so, in addition to that, the parents that we organized as our core group of parents really, number one, fundamentally wanted to, if they were going to organize, they wanted to organize in the structure of racism in our schools. And all of them had children who had been sent home for like 3 or 4 months at a time because someone didn't have paperwork. And they were being kicked out, but they were being involuntarily transferred, and then no one knew what to do with them. And so there was just an incredible amount of bureaucracy that often kept them out of school. And so it was very, at the time, back in the early 2000s, there was very little organizing around this issue. And so we did our best, humbly, to really bridge the gap. And in particular, and I'll speak more about it later, the very, very unique role of organizing parents. What you see today is much more of a movement. We are also happy to say we're core founding members of the Dignity in Schools campaign. So Harold and I work together quite often. But just to know that, 15 years ago, this was seen as controversial. 15 years ago, this was adversarial to even bring up. And hopefully we've shifted the landscape and we're on to some better times.
Thank you. I'm Harold Jordan. I live in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and I do statewide work, and I do some national work, too, as a part of the leadership team of the National Dignity in Schools campaign. I got involved in this work because I began to see some issues and problems when my kids were in school. It did not so much affect my kids, but they affected many of the kids around them. And I recall, looking back at my son's second grade experience, where kids were being separated in the classroom. Some kids, when kids did the same things, in some cases it would just be said, boys will be boys. In other cases, the kids would be sent to the office. And so I saw the differential treatment of kids as young as second graders, and began to wonder whether what I was seeing was part of something broader, and learned over the years that it has become part of something broader, of kids being treated differently, kids being treated unfairly. I have also worked as a school district administrator as well, so I've seen these issues from a number of angles. Presently, I work at the American Civil Liberties Union of Pennsylvania, mostly on school-to-prison pipeline issues, but also on students' rights issues. In fact, our work on school-to-prison pipeline issues grew out of a general concern about the rights of students in schools and fair treatment and things of that sort. So that's kind of how I come to the table. Most of the work that I do now, both in my ACLU work, but in my ACLU work as connected to dignity in schools, is really around policing in schools and the role that police play in schools. And so I hope that we can talk some about that problematic role. Sometimes the school-to-prison pipeline issue is reduced to suspension and expulsions, but there's another side of it. Police involvement with schools, with students, and the problems that creates.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. It's good to see everybody. Thanks for coming to the session. My name is Harry Lawson. I serve as the Associate Director of NEA's Human and Civil Rights Department. So professionally, I come to the work in part because our members have raised their voices, concerned about the challenges they face with various policies, the pendulum swinging on school discipline from zero tolerance to something else. And so how do they, how do they relate better to their students and the communities they serve? How do they create policy that allows them to use better judgment as opposed to just blanket suspensions like what you heard from the other panelists? So part of our work initially, because NEA has been a little slow to it, was to create some education tools, some awareness tools for our members who are educators, not just classroom teachers, but bus drivers, food service workers, run the gamut, an adult who works in the school, potentially a member of our organization in certain places. So Our first step was really to try to raise awareness of the issue for some of our members, because what we found is one of the things you hear from folks sometimes, they'll say, well, not in my school, right? And so one of the challenges was helping people understand that while it may not be your classroom, it's actually possible that down the hall you've got real issues in terms of the number of suspensions and repeat suspensions and expulsions for students. So I think we're doing a good job on that part, on that front, and then being a good partner with some of the folks here, whether it's Opportunity to Learn, Advancement Project, that one of our colleagues from the Advancement Project is actually here, doing work with them to create resources for our members, professional development tools for our members, with the primary goal of them being better partners with parents, with schools, and in the communities that they serve, but also being able to relate better to their students. Of course, when we talk a lot now, and you hear a lot now about the changing demographics all over the country, but one of the demographics that actually isn't changing as rapidly is the teaching population. And so you've got tons of children of color in schools and without educators who look like them, who may not be accustomed to the cultures that they're entering. And part of our role as a union, and one of the things that I think we're doing a pretty good job of, is we've created various professional development programs to really support our educators in being able to better relate to the students and families that they're serving. I also come to this work personally. When I grew up in Harlem, New York, had a rough time getting out of high school, as many people do. Spent probably about 8 months not in school. So I have a real good sense about how that happens, how that path can easily really get real tricky. And also as an educator in alternative high school, dealing with students who have been pushed out of other schools. I was working at a school in Maryland where we were basically the last stop. So if they couldn't be successful with us, they actually would have nowhere else to go in the county. So having a good sense about what kids have been through, some students go through, and really bringing that to how we work with our members to figure out how we create solutions, how we bring people closer to the work and give them a better understanding about what's actually happening to students.
Great, thank you. So as you can see, our panelists not only here as experts, but definitely in this work with real heart and real spirit. And I think that that's something that definitely takes when building a movement. Movements are fueled by what we've come to call the beloved community, right? And so we're definitely here today in community and want to talk about community solutions. So I just want to really lift that up and have that anchor us here in this room, that we're really about loving on young people and making sure that not only do their voices matter, but they understand and recognize that they matter, right? And when we have people in our lives that we love and we care about, and we want them to know that they matter, like we're willing to take risks for them. And so part of this work means that we've got to be risk takers, right? We really got to put ourselves on the line and figure out whatever it's going to take to keep our young people in school, getting the educations that they deserve, and that they get the ultimate message that they matter. And so in the spirit of mattering, Tony, I really would like for you, we were talking before, you shared a couple of different stories about really what this looks like in your school. And it's really local, and I really want that to just really set the tone for us. So if you could just quickly, paint a picture for us, what does zero tolerance look like? You touched on it a little bit. And what's been some of your experience or that of your peers in the school building and the classroom?
Well, one story in particular, a former member of Youth Voice, Malcolm and I are really great friends, and he expressed that he attended Cody High School here in Detroit as well. And during this regular Monday in class, the classroom was a bit chilly, so he kept his coat on. And the teacher asked him to remove it. He said, "It's cold, can I just keep it on, please?" It was dress code appropriate, so he just asked him to keep it on, please. He wasn't a problem child at all. The teacher, insisted that he take it off, She went to get the principal. The principal came and asked him, well, if you won't remove the coat, then come down to the office with me, you're going to get suspended. He said, "I'm not breaking any rules. I'm here doing my work. I was here on time, early actually. I just, want to get my education." The principal brought him down to the office, suspended him, and they told him, "Okay, you're suspended. Get off school grounds now." He walked out across the street, and a Detroit police car pulled up and said, you're supposed to be in school, why are you out here? He said, I just got suspended, I just got kicked out of school. The police gave him a ticket for truancy, for a ticket. The school didn't pay it, obviously. Took him to court, him and his aunt. His aunt had to miss work to come get him from school and to attend the court date. Another issue that still, what bothers me is that teachers can't use their own discretion. Like, teachers know, or everybody has a conscience when they know when issues aren't serious or when they can be resolved. A great friend of mine, Blake Jones, brought a butter knife to school to eat his lunch with. They recognize that as a firearm or as whether he brought a butcher knife to school. He got expelled for 180 days. It's an issue because, and Blake was a decorated student, a member of student council and everything. It's discouraging when you see your peers getting suspended over minute issues when everybody's just trying to, just make it out.
Thank you, thank you. And so Macy wanted to make this connection. As Tony was telling us these stories, what came out was also that there was a caregiver that also was impacted, right? And so as you briefly talked to us about, you doing this work with parents, really take us a little bit deeper. How do parents come in, understanding and recognizing what's happening to their young people when they send them off to school, and they have these interactions like Blake and some of these other peers, like make that connection for us if you could.
Sure. Well, thank you, Tony, for the grounding story that had no jargon in it, and certainly actually happens hundreds of times a day in schools all over the district. And even in places where, like in LA, where we have passed very progressive policy, it may not happen like that as blatantly anymore, but what I want to point to is that this is a structural and historical relationship that has happened and has gone on for hundreds of years, really. If you really want to, according to our parents, it really comes from the legacy of slavery in this country. And so, in many ways, this notion of defiance, this notion of not following the rules, this notion of, and then that being reflected on whoever raised you. It could be your parent, it could be a relative, but then the stigma that then attaches to your caregiver and the extent to which, parents already have a hard time asserting their rights. But when the stigma of your child being labeled and being deemed one way or another just because of a simple act of behavior that could be completely subjective, and then the type of treatment that our parents often testified in getting the minute that they had to enter and deal with the situation, there was already prejudice against them, even on top of the existing prejudice that already comes from being in the community, being cash and credit poor, or having situations where you can't function in a middle class manner. So when you have that stigma, and then you have to advocate for your child that they just deemed willfully defiant or insubordinate or significantly disrupting the classroom, all those, and with no investigation and no clarity about what really happened. And certainly the hardest, most tragic part is that all the students see that as well. And so the entire community is fragmented and broken from this one simple practice. Because other students don't get to see, truth and reconciliation. Other students don't get to see their family members treated with respect as their advocates and defenders. And then when the process actually happens, many times, unfortunately, students like Tony's friends and their parents don't have lawyers, attorneys, anyone to actually break down what was supposed to have happened, what their rights were, and what their recourses are. And so in many ways, the organizing of parents in this movement is, I cannot emphasize enough what a missing piece it is, not because it's not just about getting everyone to be at the table, it is that. But fundamentally, that the legacy of this treatment even being possible, warranted, justifiable by anybody is really due to the long legacy of exclusion, the never-ending Jim Crow that has happened in this country, despite all the laws that we have to take it off the books in terms of practice. And I would say that organizing parents in particular against, it is not just about suspension, it is about criminalizing your child, it is about how your child is viewed and fundamentally treated. And I know that tying this to such a long legacy of exclusion sometimes makes it too overbearing for people. But truth be told, that's exactly how our parents came into the issue. And so fighting the school prison pipeline is not an overnight, it may feel like an overnight sensation, but it's not. We got into it almost 10 years ago, actually 10 years ago, exactly. And in the process, it was just a small step in a really long haul mission. And, at college we use the human rights framework, so this notion of a right to quality education it's a long arc that we have to envision. And breaking the school prison pipeline is really the de facto situation. People think of public education, but our parents really articulate that the system their children are in is the school prison pipeline. There is no alternate system. It is that. That is the public education system. It's code for the same thing. So jargon or not, hopefully the stories that Tony just described and all the signs of it, that you can see, that most of us can see, but we don't think it's any big deal unless the child goes to jail. But lots of those signs are exclusionary acts. They're separated. They separate folks. They take us away from engaging the whole family as partners. And in many cases, this is, most of our parents would say they were pushed out of school too. So this is an intergenerational structural pattern that it cannot be seen as isolated to a child, cannot be tied to just personal responsibility. Yes, we have responsibility in the moment that we act. However, it usually does carry the weight of a whole lot of history. And when parents are called about such an act, the hard part is that they want to defend their children, but if they do, people call the police on them too. And many of our parents have experienced that fear of literally being angry because that's how they feel. But that's okay to be angry in other neighborhoods, but it's not okay where they're at. So it comes with a lot. It's a big burden, and organizing parents we have lots of ways in which we're trying to break through all of those structural barriers, but I will say that for the next question.
Thank you. Well, you ended on such a great point, and it's a connecting thread that I actually really want Harold for you to jump in on, and that's this issue of policing, right? So when Tony talked about not only this young man getting suspended for, we could all argue whether or not that was something that was worthy of a suspension, but then, right, literally around the corner, he gets a ticket, or, potentially he gets picked up by the police, right? So first interaction with the police. And then we talk about parents trying to advocate and parents, right, be there for their young people, and then being pushed out of school and their interaction with police, right? So we have this reoccurring theme and presence of law enforcement. And I'm thinking also at this time, Harold, of all the news that I've been reading over the last, couple of years, certainly this year, there was fake news at the top of the year that suspensions were down. Colorado, right? So there's this issue in Denver. We knew that they had just egregiously high suspension rate, and they went down. And then we went a little bit further. We peeled back the layers a little bit, and the onion started to get strong, and our eyes started to water, because then we saw that while suspensions were going down, that, referrals to law enforcement were going up for students, primarily students of color. So help me understand that, right? What is this thing about interaction with police and young people and their parents, and what that means in terms of the school to prison pipeline, and what's the work happening around that?
Okay, a couple of things. I'm glad you mentioned the Denver example, because it's really an example of multiple things. One is what you said about the increase in police referrals for some students, but the bigger picture there is that while suspensions went down substantially overall, they did not go down substantially for African American students. So I want to make the point that there is a race issue that's above and beyond all of these things that we're talking about that needs some looking at. In fact, there's some interesting new research on the issue of racial disproportionality in discipline. One of the conclusions that's been drawn from this pretty new research is that the attitude of the principal about discipline has the greatest impact on racial disproportionality than any other factor. I don't know if that makes any sense, what I just said, but that's the new research. It's not the severity of the infraction or anything else, but it's the attitude about that the principal has that seems to correlate to the disproportionate discipline of students of color in a school. So that's one thing to think about. The policing issue it's kind of a strange issue because police do a lot of different things, and there are many different types of police, whether it's the school district police or the city police department or this relatively new type of police called the school resource officers that are sort of a blend of different models, and they play different roles. There was a push from, I think, proponents of having more police in schools to have police blend in and to be seen as being just like regular school officials rather than as law enforcement, and that itself has created a problem, including the intervention of police in matters that would not normally be considered police matters. So I'll give you an example from Western Pennsylvania, where a kid was standing in the hall during class time, talking on a cell phone. Now, that would be 2 violations of school rule. You're supposed to be in class, and you're not supposed to be talking on a cell phone in school. Clear. Have no idea what he was talking about. Doesn't matter. No one has made any allegation that there was criminal activity or anything of the sort. The school resource officer is walking down the hall, grabs the kid, tries to take the kid to the office. The kid sort of flails and said, no, I'm going to finish my call or whatever. The next thing you know, pulls out a taser, tases the kid. And the kid goes to the hospital and gets charged with assaulting an officer. Now, there are different versions about what happened once the police officer put his hand on the kid. But the important thing is, like, why on earth would a law enforcement official be involved in dealing with a cell phone violation? You know, in the first place. But there are situations where police are involved in incidents that are really not legitimately police matters. And so, you know, one of the things that we've been working for in Philadelphia and some other places is to not only change the sort of zero tolerance practices on the school end, but also change the policing practices. So now, for example, as of March of this year, the school police have a directive that says we will no longer send police officers out for the following kinds of violations. And these are things, by the way, that should no longer lead to suspensions. Failure to follow classroom rules, dress code violations, failure to carry hall passes. And there's a whole long list of things like that. Inappropriate use of electronic devices. They're saying, don't call us, that's a classroom management issue, that's an internal school issue. But if you don't have policing policies and policing directives that say that certain things are off limits, then you have more of a problem with this other area. And then finally, I want to make a point that's not specifically tied to policing, that may be mildly controversial, but I think that one of the things that has led to sort of a growing negative view about zero tolerance practices in schools and a growing, when I say growing, I mean growing in school communities and local communities, is the irrationality and the unevenness and the craziness about intervention and removing kids from school. Let me be a little bit more specific than that. One of the things I observed in Philadelphia is that, you know, kids were being kicked out of school for all kinds of things, coming late to school, whatever, and at the same time you would see in select instances that there would be no intervention in matters that are more serious, where some kids are assaulting other students and things of that sort. In the end, that led to an undermining of the confidence in this system of just of suspending large numbers of kids. It led to a lack of confidence in how the district did its business. And so, but that's a piece of the picture, and I know it's not something we often talk about, but I said in the beginning, I came at this work originally from the perspective, at least professionally, from the perspective of somebody who worked on student rights issues. But when I talk about students' rights, I mean the right not to be harassed as well as the right to express yourself and do things of that sort. And so it's important that there be the right types of intervention when there are serious forms of harassment that kids are experiencing, and that it be done at the early stages and not at a point where something has to become a police matter and things of that sort. But that's a piece of the picture too. The right kinds of intervention, proper intervention, consistent intervention, but also non-intervention when that's the right thing to do. Hope that makes sense.
Yeah.
It might be mildly controversial, but
All right, thank you. And thank you for helping us to better understand what's happening with this policing work. And so, Harry, we come to you having heard now from young people and parents, and I think, folks are starting to get a little upset, trying to figure out what's happening in schools, right? Like, who's responsible for putting police in schools? We're probably looking for someone to blame now. And then we've also been introduced to this concept of student rights, right, and parent rights, and that we're operating with the human rights frames. I think the default is to say that it must be our educators. And then in addition to that, we're reading at the top of this year that suspensions are happening for certain types of students as young as preschool, right? I think the latest data shows that at least in like the 2011-2012 school year, that Black children made up about 18% of the preschool population, preschool enrollment, and about 48% of preschool suspensions. So something's happening, and it's not that they're talking on their cell phones. It's not that they're assaulting school resource officers. So talk to us about that, the other actor in this school discipline issue, and really what it is that the teachers and educators and administrators are doing to really turn things around. Did I set it up too difficult for you?
Yeah, we all had big tabs here. So you can have
Well, let me see. I think with the advent of the public education reform movement, right, the fingers really have been squarely pointed at the educators, right, for basically everything. Mm-hmm. But the short answer to your question, right, what do we have to, who needs to be involved, right, the short answer is everybody. And one of the challenges that we find is typically when things are implemented, there's no training provided. This is the kind of things that the union will raise, right? So, for example, if you want to implement, let's say, a work site or even a school district wants to now implement restorative justice practices, but they provide no additional training and support for the educators to actually implement it, so that you've got a mismatch of how things are being implemented. You've got unclear directives about who's responsible for what. If everybody isn't participating, how are the interventions and engagements with students and educators different when they go from one classroom to the next, from that classroom to the bus, from the bus to get breakfast, right? So there's an imbalance to the point that Harold was making about having consistent interventions. So I think, what we're trying to do, at least from our perspective, is one, like I led with, is one, helping educators understand what this issue really looks like. Because the common refrain back to us as we've been engaged in this is not here, right? It's not happening. It may be happening at that school over there, right, but it doesn't happen over here. And why do I need to do that? And so by helping educators be able to really actually read the data and not just the numbers, but to actually look at the data and understand what it's telling them about where you need to target, right? That's the other thing we're trying to help some of our educators, as they're engaged in these discussions with districts. It's not necessarily always about whole district change, right? That's what the data will tell us. The data will tell us where we need to focus our attention from time to time. Maybe it's not all the schools. It's not all the educators. And so just being more deliberate about really examining what the problems are, providing, if we're going to change policy, if we're going to ask people to do something different, to implement other kinds of interventions and programs and practices, at least for the educators to provide the support that they need to do that properly. And I also think one of the places where we miss out is typically we don't bring the community into that process. Right? So if we're implementing new policies, it might be nice for the parents to know that. And not just know it because they got a letter that came home, but trying to figure out how we engage them in understanding what we are now doing in the classroom and in the schoolhouse to effectively change the way we provide or engage in discipline, right? So provide support to students and interventions. What we're doing different, we need to share that with parents, with the community, so that they too can participate in that process, right? So that, because if we're not all doing it, and we're all doing something different, and we're all viewing each other different, which means the finger pointing starts, because if I think I'm doing the right thing, then you must be doing the wrong thing, right? With me, and we've seen this over the years. I mean, these discussions have played out publicly for years, this debate between parents and educators about who's responsible for child's behavior, for child's learning. I think we are, as a union, we are coming to the place where we are, I think, really able to articulate that it is everybody. And we have to do our part to make sure that we're being inclusive, to be better partners. And that's what I was saying earlier. We have several kinds of professional development programs related to diversity, cultural competence, and those things. It's hard for us to get it out to everybody because it can be so intensive. But in the places that we're able to provide training to educators, we actually see better results in terms of their relationship, not just with the students, but relationship with parents, and in turn the community. And what we're going to have to start to test for, we plan on starting to do some of that work this year, is to find out over a period of time what the impact is of implementing those kinds of professional development programs are on discipline, right, on achievement, those kinds of things. Do we actually see change? And so, for example, outside of Chicago, there's a community high school district in Oaklawn. So Oaklawn has approached us about essentially providing cultural competence training, diversity training, and social justice training for every staff member in the district over the course of the year. And we verbally committed. We haven't really laid out a plan on how to do that.
Okay.
But we verbally committed. We've committed to implementing an assessment before we start to deliver the training, so that we can then deliver that assessment every year to see whether or not needles are being moved in certain areas that are important to us, that the members are raising these issues to us. And right now, one of the big issues, of course, is school discipline and the impact on families.
So that's work that's to come, and it sounds really exciting. Is there anything that you can lift up in terms of, community partnership and actually working with parents in the last couple of years? Is there anything that, in your work, personally, especially how you come to this work, right? Really understanding that there is a disconnection, right? And when students are not in school and they're disconnected from a school system, that there's a whole lot of other stuff that happens and the whole impact on the family, right? Like, we've heard so much about that. So is there anything for our folks in the room today that you just lift up for us? Because we know that you're committed and we understand that it's an important issue, that there's work to come, but like, we're in now, right? And we know that we have disconnected young people now. Is there anything that's out there that we
There's
look
a lot
to?
of, there's a lot of examples about
Just one.
educator. Okay, well, one in particular, they're starting to expand it, but the local in Miami-Dade came to us and asked for a seed grant to start a mentoring program for young men of color, and I can't think of the actual neighborhood, but in one particular community, as a starting point to provide additional support to students who are at risk, of course, of entering the school-to-prison pipeline, because the school district isn't changing its policy, right? So that's the back-end challenge, right? We want to do things, but if we're not changing the policy, we've got to then think about what supports need to be in place to provide it in a different way. And in this case, our union is being real creative in terms of partnering with the community, partnering with their national organization to provide the seed funds to support the work that they're doing in terms of engaging parents, family, community to support their children, right, who are having some achievement struggles related to discipline challenges. And so they're providing, it's essentially a mentoring program. They've asked us to, of course, seed some more so they can kind of expand it. And actually, I should back up. We have a program that we use with some of our locals that may be interested in, that are interested in really deepening their relationships in the communities that they're in. We call it community conversations. And what we do is we work with the local to identify a host of people. We train them on how to be facilitators and recorders. We work with them to basically do power maps of the community to determine who they need to have in the room to have these kind of broad discussions about what issues they want to attempt to tackle together. And so through that process in Miami-Dade, this program and project is a result of their community conversation there. And that's, so they're asking to expand, Miami-Dade, for those of you, your geography, the county is huge. So you can't just roll something out across the county. You've got to take steps, build, and that's what they're doing there. So, does that?
Yeah, no, that sounds great. I just wanted us to be able to lift up something that, we felt like it's working.
I'm doing from NEA Media, and I have a few examples.
Okay, great. So we're gonna throw out, because we know we've got some great expertise in the room in a second. Just want to bring up a couple other things, and I heard Atlanta projects in the room, so we definitely want to hear from y'all. Love your work, and whoever else is part of our boots on the ground. So we've kind of skated a little bit around this issue, and we just want to throw it out here and really bring it up, right? And that's just the issue of race. There is definitely a color to this work. Macy, you talked about it. So let's go there. Like, I don't have anything else to say in terms of setting it up.
You want to go first?
Let's go there and let's...
Facilitator's prerogative. Set it up for us.
And so, we could talk about race probably all day, but really, I really want to lift up for folks and really help us to make this connection that we can't just, we're not going to mentor our way out of racism, right? And so what is it that needs to happen at the systemic level, right? So what sort of root cause analysis might we need to do what has been happening? And what have we discovered that actually gets us to this point where the data is telling us that, we hear all the time now that Black boys have the highest suspension rate of all students, but what we don't hear about is right behind them are Black girls. So Black girls are suspended at a higher rate than all other boys and all girls, right? So Black children are being suspended. And so and for different reasons. It is not always about having some sort of interaction. As a matter of fact, the gender piece of the racism that we're finding that it's embedded in the school to prison pipeline issue helps us to appreciate that. Black girls get suspended for, for things like, not being ladylike enough, right? And so it's very biased, it's very opinion-based. And so, just sort of struggling with that and really looking for some answers and wanting to particularly hear from our folks up here how you're tackling the issue of race in your work. And even more so, if there are issues of race plus sexism, plus some other isms, right? We know that we have some compound oppression, and we have students who are queer identified, and also happen to be students of color, and they also happen to be, right, like gender non-conforming, like we could just go on, right, and poor, right, like, and what that really means. We could go on. So but I think that at the crux of that really is the issue of race, right? Because when you walk in the room, your color kind of tells on you. How are we talking about this? How are we tackling it? And where do we go from here? I lost a lot, but let's do it.
Wow.
Just to touch on it a bit, minority students are 5 times more likely to be suspended for insubordination rather than their white counterparts. And studies have shown that the majority of teachers don't even know what insubordination means. It's just a catch-all term. It's just, you disagree with me, so you're insubordinate. Or, just something just to get them there. And minority students are, most of the time, deemed to be problem children. So the issue always goes back to money. When schools' test scores are low, they're overlooked. So problem children are more likely to be deemed for the problem of low test scores. You're Black, you're a problem child, you don't study, you fail tests, so this is why our funding is low. So we're going to alleviate you from the problem. We're going to suspend you. We're going to expel you. You're not going to be a part of our school system. So that's why minority children are more affected, and inner city students are more affected by the school prison pipeline. Please.
Okay, well, and I am going to feed off of Tony and shake it up some more, because as I mentioned earlier, the art and science of organizing parents, I think, eludes most folks. People often ask me, what is it that you do? I think there's some magical one that we do, that we just get parents out, and because truth of the matter is no one just has enough love or patience and unconditional love at that. So quite frankly, we, just like many people are just die-hard advocates of young people, we are that cadre as a community of parents and that for each other. And then we have staff that obviously are trying to transfer and make sure all the conditions are there for our parents, regardless of language, age, life experiences, income, the structure of their lives, their circumstances, that they actually can be very conscious, critical, collaborative, coalition-based and oriented and collective change agents. And one of the reasons is because all the things that Tony just described, it's a structural issue. It's not an individual pull yourself up by your bootstraps solution. And the notion of hundreds of parents who all understand what a discipline policy is and know how to monitor it and know how to both read the data, talk to their kids, talk to other parents across race, Spanish or English, across the block, this my neighborhood and your neighborhood, can go to the school district and talk to the school principal, can go to our state capitol, can go to Washington, D.C., and across the board still raise that this is an issue about race, and that we at Cadre do it with both African American and Latino parents. That takes a lot of love. It takes a lot of hard work to build up those conditions because structurally they don't exist. And so our contribution to this movement has been to build an organization that is led by our parents that, and I dare say the radical proposition is that to save our public schools, that this has to be a major piece of the solution. And with all due respect to the decades of underfunding and underreach in the recent years of incredible cuts to our schools, it really isn't a funding problem. Because this treatment happens to kids of color in affluent schools. It has happened when the overuse of suspensions rose. It wasn't when funding was, it wasn't the last 5 years. It was in the 90s when we were in surplus, and quite frankly, as much training as is needed, because we certainly want different school climates and we want everyone with more capacity, be it for cultural competency, be it for responding to behavior, responding to trauma. The fundamental notion, this is also about altering the power dynamics, in our schools and be able to raise the issue of race in a way that makes everybody more courageous and bolder. And it's hard. Cadre is, we've been fortunate that we've just always picked the right moment to do what we do, and we have changed school discipline policy in the LA Unified School District, the second largest school district in the country. We're about to make huge change at the state level in California. We've helped birth the Dignity Schools campaign, which is rocking all over the country. But probably what's most important is that it's still an uphill battle to get conditions to change at local schools. So changing conditions is it's not a moment, as Reverend Barbara said last night, it's a movement. Right? It is about everybody digging in and just looking at how they can change. And the radical proposition is that I don't know if we can wait for anything, to be quite honest. All good intentions aside, we can't wait for everybody to get it together. We just can't. We need to mandate some of it to force the issue. We need to have courageous conversations to build and change the relationships that we have with one another. But the truth of the matter is, all the success that Cadre has had, our target school, we have a lot of data that's going to come out this year about how great our suspension rates are in LA Unified. We have schools that are down to like 6. But guess what? 3 of them are black kids. So I usually say, I don't care if it's 1 suspension. That kid will be black in some kind of way. That's really the outlook that we have. And so we also have to be careful that it's not just about reducing suspensions down to 0. But, and our parents are now looking at the next decade of work and how we're really going to change the conditions in schools. It is about everybody learning the alternative practices, everybody respecting one another, but I think fundamentally everyone is going to have to concede a little bit, but also be bolder and stronger. We actually at Cadre have initiated conversations with our teachers union, our local, and I wish I could say it turned out great. It hasn't. It's been really a trying time. The issue of eliminating suspensions for willful defiance, which we did last year, was a sticking point. And limiting discretion is a sticking point. But we now know what we have to work on for the next 10 years, and obviously we have to do a lot of more work. So despite all the attention that this issue is getting, we do have to keep our nose to the grind. We have to know that this issue of race, that this didn't happen overnight, so suspension rates going down to zero cannot really, we can't think that that's the end of it. And then I'd like to just leave with everyone also this notion of organizing parents and having everyone reflect on how you view parents, whether or not you subconsciously, hold parents responsible for children's behavior to least, but recognizing that in another community, that same behavior is rewarded. So.
Okay. Well, let me just take on the issue of race from a couple of perspectives. One is I just want to remind people to put some resources there, but one of them is an interesting Rolling Stone article, Can We Fix the Race Problem in America's School Discipline? 4 solutions from a new federal report on discriminatory discipline policies, and you should pick that up. It's in the back on the chairs there. The second thing is Dignity in Schools is organizing a webinar specifically on the issue of racial disproportionality that looks at this in some detail. Stay tuned. Just log on to dignityinschools.org. It's in the works right now. Originally it's going to be July, but it looks like it'll be in the fall. And so that'll be another place where you can have an informed conversation about this. One important piece of moving forward on the issue of race is to understand exactly what's happening. So you got to move beyond just the gross statistics that say this type of student is more likely than that type of student to see what are the actual practices that lead to that. A couple of things we know. When it comes to the use of suspensions, what the research shows is that white students are more often referred to the office, which is like one step in the process here, one important point in the process for things that are considered more objective offenses, such as smoking, vandalism, leaving without permission, and obscene language. If you see it, you know it. It's not something where there's a great degree, either somebody's smoking or they're not smoking. There's not a lot of subjectivity there. African American students are more often referred to the central office for things like that are more subjective: disrespect, excessive noise, threatening behavior, loitering, things of that sort. That's what the research shows, and so you got to kind of get behind that to understand exactly what's happening in individual schools. Moreover, the interesting thing is that black students tend to be removed from school, and this is true from the research in several states, tend to be removed from school for offenses where removal is not mandated by state law. So if you look at state zero tolerance laws, which are in many cases variations on sort of anti-weapons laws, if you look at who's removed from school for what, black students are disproportionately removed from school for things other than offenses where the state law mandates, which suggests that a lot of those removals are discretionary and therefore offenses that are less minor than what the zero tolerance law mandates. And that's in a number of states that's been shown from the data. So that's another thing to look at. So there's clearly something going on there. The federal discipline guidance addresses this issue in some regards too, and I really urge people to take a look at it and to use it, have it serve as a basis of filing complaints or things of that sort. But they give a number of interesting examples of how kids who do the same things are treated differently. So one example they give is about fighting. 2 kids are involved in a fight, different racial ethnic backgrounds. One kid is suspended, the other kid's not. Now, it would be, what the government says is it would be possibly discriminatory and therefore something they might want to investigate if the kids played the same role in the fight, but one type of student tend to be suspended where the other one gets more of a slap on the wrist or something less than suspension. But they also give another example to say, well, okay, this happens with the fight itself, but when an adult at the school tries to intervene If one kid responds in a negative way toward that adult, and the other kid doesn't, then that might not be considered discriminatory. So they have a bunch of different interesting examples in the discipline guidance that I think can help in practice sort out these issues as to what's going on and how it's handled. And then finally, I would say that something that would help overall is really a big focus on due process anytime there's discipline. Due process isn't, people think of due process the wrong way. I think sometimes it's not just about giving somebody who did something wrong a way to make an excuse, a forum to make an excuse for why they shouldn't be punished. That's how people often think about due process. The point of due process, in my mind, is that it establishes a forum where people can put different information into the record and opens up the possibility of you learning more about what actually happened, what the context was for it. Because a lot of times what happened is that discipline is reactionary, and kind of like, you know, in the NFL, the player who throws the last blow is the one who's thrown out of the game. But that ignores everything that happened before that and everything that's going on around it. So we've seen, especially with kids who are punished for things like bullying, one of the things that happens is sometimes it's the victim that's punished, right? And so due process is important so that you get the whole story out there from multiple perspectives to be able to sort out what's happened in those situations. And I think that's important, that there be sort of strict adherence to sort of due process, an appropriate process, anytime you plan to seriously discipline a kid. And I think that will help get at issues of race as well. So it's just a few small things for me.
I think that's great. I want to get you in, but I also want to see if there's any questions in the queue. We only have a few minutes, and we started a little bit late, so I might let us go a couple more minutes if you guys have time. So if folks just want to, get your hands up so I can see them. We'll try to throw them out. So if we can try to go quick and then get some of these thoughts and get a couple at a time, and then let you guys tackle them.
Oh, you want me to go quick?
If you have, I mean.
It's quick, it's quick.
Okay.
The question was, what are we doing?
Mm-hmm.
And I think what we're trying to do is to simply name, right? And be consistent about naming and pointing to it and identifying it. That's professionally, but personally I do have just a one. Legislating behavior is very difficult. Every zero tolerance policies prove that. Putting stuff on paper doesn't change people's behavior. Naming it, always naming it, pointing to it, confronting it, talking about it openly and honestly is how we're going to get at this. I know putting things on paper will allow us to have the conversation sometimes, but always cautious about if we think we're going to solve the problem of race by putting things on paper. I would say after so many years, how's that going? Right? And so 60 years later, around the board, where are we exactly? And it's primarily because we then rely on what's on paper as opposed to being willing, and to Maisie's point, being bold and able to confront and talk about the issues that matter and that impact us on a daily basis. So as a union, one of the things we're trying to do better is actually being consistent about naming and putting our fingers on it.
That's all right. Sounds great. Thank you. So there's a question here, here, and here. We could all just question. That means question mark really quickly. 1, 2, 3, and then we'll get some reactions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone, for sharing your stories. I had a question around tangible things that folks can do on institutional levels. I don't have a kid, so sometimes it's hard for me to get involved in schools and just talking to people. What else can I do?
Okay. Question right here. Thank you. What can be done?
Yeah, just had a question about what, I don't know when I'm hearing these numbers if charter schools are taken into account there, or if it's just public schools. I didn't know, and like what role charter schools play in all of this, if any.
Thank you. So what can be done on an institutional level? How do charter schools factor in this question right here?
Mine briefly, because you all hit on it. I believe we are conceptually trapped and imprison ourselves. These are not civil rights issues. You brought it up. These are human rights issues. We should be talking about this at the UN. You can't go from human bondage to human freedom with the civil rights movement. Unfortunately, we seem to be tethered to this civil rights industrial complex. So I want to know, how far have you taken it on a human right? There's a convention about children, even though the U.S. isn't signed on it.
So the question is, how far has this work gone on,
Yes.
on a human rights
Exactly.
level? All right, thank you. So if we could tackle those 3 questions, we don't have to speak to everything, so if there's any way to get it all in. Anybody?
I know Harold really wants to respond to charter.
All right, go
Well,
ahead.
the charter
That's the other
one,
ones.
you want to take the human rights?
Sure. What about an intangible to do that?
Intangible, we can all take. Charter, major issue. And it's something that Dignity in Schools and some other organizations are doing work on. You had something to add to?
No, go ahead, go ahead.
Okay, all right. Okay, all right. So charter schools are these independently managed schools that receive public funding. However, that independent management often excludes the discipline arena, to issues of lack of public or parental or guardian or even student input in the processes. Not that it's great in regular public schools, but in many cases in charter schools, there's not even a forum in which you can demand that kind of input. So we know that some charter schools engage in bizarre disciplinary practices, such as discipline fines. In Chicago, the Noble network of schools, they collected $3 million in discipline fines in 1 year. Arbitrary behavior. We had a situation in Philadelphia where they were trying to expel black female students, right? Not a minor thing, expel for wearing hoops earrings. I'm just wearing them, not like taking it out and poking somebody with something, but wearing them. And so there's there are a number of problems around the charter schools and charter accountability that I think need to be addressed. Dignity in Schools is coming out with a principles of accountability statement for charters that sort of examines some of that. So in the end, I think it'll be about a 2-page document with some key points of things that folks should look at and push for when it comes to holding charters accountable. It's a big issue.
Thank you. Macy, human rights?
Okay, and I'll try to add the tangible one too, but we do actually use it. We use the human rights framework because it's too hard it's too limiting, the civil rights framework. You gotta prove too much to prove that it's a problem. And we have great respect for all of our civil rights partners who, I think our movement is pushing, and the Dignity in Schools campaign is also pushing it on a national level to see it as a human rights issue. And I know personally, on behalf of the country, have taken it to a sub-meeting of the UN. It wasn't the UN, but it was a sub-meeting in Geneva. And but quite frankly, in an international context, they understand this much better than we do here in the United States. And we are one of 2 countries in the world, the other one being Somalia, who have not signed on to the Convention on the Rights of the Child. It is, that's a whole other conversation that we could have, but I definitely appreciate, and I'm happy to have it with you so that we can actually riff off of that tragedy there. And on the tangible level, I think it is difficult, but the reason I want to pose these radical propositions is that many times our stances on education sometimes don't include this issue. And so I don't know if it's an institutional thing per se, but I think that how we vote around education, whether we, it's not even about for charters or against charters or for funding, and it's looking into and peeling the wool off of what most of it really means, and trying to figure out if it's going to help the groups of children that are most likely to be affected by the school that doesn't hire them, and looking at everything through that lens, policy-wise, framing and messaging-wise, memes, whatever, but a lot of folks are not, if they don't have children, we're following some broader debate that many times is bought off, about education, and many times we just need to actually just look more deeply. And when you vote for policies that have to do with education, look more deeply, and encourage people to look more deeply and to think about the structure of race inside these policies. So I don't know if that helps, but that's my quick answer.
Thank you. And I saw a hand back here.
And don't forget Harry.
So method to this magnet. Yes, right here. Yes.
Thanks. I think more so than a question, I just would like to say how appalled I am at what's going on in the United States. And I've just come back from living internationally for the last 30 years. I found out about the school to prison pipeline, reading things online, and I just said, when I do go back, because I knew I was coming back from the States, I lived in Greece, I said I wanted to get involved. I am now living in Colorado. I just passed, this past 9 months, I worked in the school system in Aurora Public Schools, and I witnessed a police officer come into the school to pick up one of the kids. I just happened to be walking down the hall, and I said to him, oh, hi, you know, like, what are you doing here? And I saw him escort a second grader out. And so I would like to know, since you did mention that in Denver, that the incidence of suspensions has lowered, but the incidence of police officers making an involvement has risen, I would like to know, and I'm asking you where I can get involved, how I can be a voice. I am going back into the Denver public school system as a senior program director for the extended learning programs, the after-school program. And what I want to bring to that, besides the STEM and the math, is this whole idea of diversity, culture, who I am, how I am, and what it means to be who I am, whether you're Mexican, Iranian, Iraqi, Black American, Chinese American, or whatever. I applaud your work. I'd like to say to Tony that I think it's great, and I'm glad to see a young voice here, because we need to hear more from the children, the people that it has affected. And I'd like to just say that I probably would have never had stayed in school. I'm from New York, I'm from Brooklyn. I probably would have been kicked out of school all the time, listening to what's going on. I cannot believe that you're talking about wearing earrings, and that's an expression, or having braids in your hair, that's an expression of defiance. When I grew up in the 70s, yes it was, because they didn't know what our black hair looked like naturally, because they wanted us to look like them. But yeah, I would like to talk to all of you, and I'd like to let me know how I can get involved, what I can do, because I will be going into the school system, and I would like your support, and I'd like to know what I can bring into my principal to understand, because I have witnessed that.
You got it. Too. You got it. We'll definitely support you. So
the idea of that question about what people can do, I mean, whether you are an educator or not, I mean, there's identifying what's actually happening a lot of times is the hardest part. So, for example, I know in Denver, I mean, Advancement Project's done some work there with Panelists, both in Denver, and I know one of the gentlemen who works for Panelists is now doing some more work in Jefferson County, so engaging them, because they have played a huge role for, what, 10, 12, 15 years in having that discussion in the Denver community, so reaching out to them is one way.
So just
one of the things
grab one of us
we'll
afterwards.
do, just in the interest of time, I really want to be respectful of everyone, try to get you out of here, but I think some of us might be able to stick around and have some of these individual conversations. And also, just for the larger group, before I let everyone give you 30 seconds to close this out, just let you know that, so the National Opportunity Learn campaign will pull together all of these resources and make them available on its website. So we'll make sure that everyone has that information. We'll also tweet it out. So look at the NN14 hashtag, and we'll make sure to have all of those resources there, all these organizations. There's a state map, all of that, so you can just figure out where you are and how you can plug in. And so I want to, again, 30 seconds. I'm going to cut you off. Just really, what is the last thing that you want to leave us with as we go forth into the work? Starting at the bottom with Harry.
I had time.
Have time to think. Yeah. Snap.
Well, I think what I would leave people with is one: if you see it, name it. Right, confront it. If we're going to create solutions, we can't walk away from what we see. So when you leave here, if you're interested in doing something, you have resources here in the room. But when you go back, I mean, really, if you are interested, there are people doing work all over this country, and sometimes the hardest part is identifying them. But if you want to get into it, I mean, I think you just have to do that. That's what we need.
All right. If you see it, name it. I am. Go ahead, Harold.
You see something, say something, unless it's a person work for him. That's so wonderful posting. In any case, all right, but seriously, listen, dignityinschools.org is a place to check to find out what's going on. They actually have a resources section by state, so that's a good place to look. And then you can send me an email with your question about like, who's doing this, or how can I get this, and I will respond to you. I am H. Jordan, HJORDAN, at aclupa.org. You have to have the PA on there, aclupa.org. H. Jordan, just hit me up and I'll connect you to folks.
All right. Yeah, David, get in contact with Harold, maybe see what you got.
Just to really believe that this issue can really help us think bold and in a visionary manner about repurposing public education to serve all of our society, but especially for these of us. And last, the organization I've been humbled to lead for the last 13 years is Cadre, an acronym, just like the word, CADRE, and it's www.cadre-la.org. And talk to me later if you need to.
Going off of what Maisie said, it's easy to think that the school to prison pipeline only affects particular students and their respective families, but we must remember that our whole society will feel the consequences of this. And today's youth are tomorrow's youth. We can't teach students out of school.
Perfect. Thank you all for joining us this afternoon. We could have had a much longer discussion on this very important issue. I think we did the best we could. Connect with our panelists.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
You guys are wonderful. I want to do anything.